Looking for magic cards? At flipsidegaming.com you can now use the promo code LVD to get a 10% discount on orders over $10 while supporting the channel at the same time. Hello and welcome to another episode of Wacky Wednesday, a weekly series where we explore wacky deck ideas in both standard and modern, and this week we're back to modern with an awesome Polymorph deck. Polymorph being a 4-mana sorcery that reads, destroy target creature, it can be regenerated, and its controller reveals cards from the top of his or her library until he or she reveals a creature card, and then puts that card onto the battlefield and then shuffles his or her library. So the idea behind a Polymorph deck is not to target the opponent's creatures with Polymorph, but instead you're going to target your own creatures with Polymorph, and then if you can make sure that the only actual creature in the deck is an Emrakul, the Aeons Torn, you'll always find it with your Polymorph, resulting in a 4-mana 15/15 with flying, protection from colored spells, and Annihilator 6, which is a pretty great way to win the game. Of course, you do need some creatures to target with Polymorph, which is where tokens like Lingering Souls come in, which don't count as actual creatures when going through the deck with Polymorph, but of course are valid targets for Polymorph. And then this particular deck also has a second combo besides Polymorph, and that's the Thopter Foundry Sword of the Meek combo. So Thopter Foundry is a 2-mana artifact that says for 1 mana you can sacrifice a non-token artifact to make a 1/1 blue Thopter artifact creature token with flying, and you also gain 1 life. And then the second piece of the combo is Sword of the Meek, which is a 2-mana artifact that equips a creature for 2 mana and gives it +1/+2, but the important part here is that whenever a 1/1 creature enters a battlefield under our control, we can return Sword of the Meek from our graveyard to the battlefield attached to that creature. So if you have both Thopter Foundry and Sword of the Meek in play, you can sacrifice Sword of the Meek to the Thopter Foundry ability, resulting in Sword of the Meek going to the graveyard. Then you'll get a 1/1 Thopter token and gain a life. Then, since a 1/1 creature entered the battlefield, you get to return Sword of the Meek from the graveyard right away, attached to the Thopter token, and then you get to repeat this process however many times you want, so essentially resulting in, for every mana you pay, you'll get a 1/1 Thopter token with flying, and you'll gain a life, which is a very powerful effect against any fair deck that's not trying to combo you out. So those are the 2 main combos in the deck. Of course they also work nicely together, since Thopter Foundry providing tokens for Polymorph means that we'll have plenty of targets to target with our Polymorph. Now let's take a look at the entire deck, starting out with 4 copies of Serum Visions to provide us with some card selection to set up our different combos, so this lets us draw a card and then scry 2. Then we have 6 1-mana removal spells in 4 copies of Fatal Push and 2 copies of Path to Exile. Then we have 6 hand disruption spells, 4 copies of Inquisition, and 2 copies of Thoughtseize to interact with the opponent. And one neat interaction with Thoughtseize is that sometimes you might want to Thoughtseize yourself to make yourself discard Emrakul if it's stuck in your hand and you want to Polymorph, since when Emrakul goes to the graveyard you get to shuffle it back into your deck, so that's a small interaction that could come up. Then of course we've got our Thopter Foundry plus Sword of the Meek combo. And next up we have 4 copies of Thirst for Knowledge, which does a lot of different things for the deck. So for 3 mana we get to draw 3 and then discard 2 unless we discard an artifact card, which of course if we just discard a Sword of the Meek, that's a pretty great interaction, since we might be able to get the sword back from the graveyard just by casting a Lingering Souls or by making a Thopter. Then even if we don't discard an artifact, Thirst for Knowledge still gives us a lot of card selection, helping us to assemble our different combos. Thirst for Knowledge also lets us discard Emrakul if we do happen to draw it, since we don't want to have it in our hand when casting Polymorph. And we can also just discard Lingering Souls for value, which have flashback, so we still get to make some tokens from the graveyard. So Lingering Souls is our next card here, 3 mana to make 2 1/1 spirit tokens with flying, also has flashback for just 1 and a black, so a great value card, sets up our Polymorph nicely, works well with Sword of the Meek, and is also a great card to discard to our Thirst for Knowledge, so just an awesome card in the deck and the main reason why we're splashing white. Then of course our 4 copies of Polymorph and our Emrakul, the Aeons Torn. Then our mana base is pretty straightforward. The only special lands here are 1 copy of Academy Runes, which can help us put artifacts from the graveyard back on top of our library, and an Urborg, which turns all our lands into swamps, so we can help fix for black mana. Then we have 4 fast lands in Darkslick Shores. We've got a total of 9 fetch lands, 4 Flooded Strand, 4 Polluted Delta, and a Marsh Flats. Then we have 5 basics and 2 swamps, a plains, and 2 islands. Then some shock lands, we've got a Hallowed Fountain, a Godless Shrine, and a Watery Grave, and 2 check lands in 1 copy of Glacial Fortress and 1 Drowned Catacomb. Then going over to the sideboard real quick, we've got 2 additional creatures, an Elesh and an Iona, since there are some matchups where you might want to replace Emrakul with one of these instead, if these can guarantee you the win. Then you've got 2 copies of Dispel against any blue decks. They're also good against Burn, against Collected Company decks, and they've got a lot of other applications. We've got a Disdainful Stroke mainly against Eldrazi decks and against Scapeshift decks. We've got 2 pieces of the puzzle if we need to gain some card advantage in more grindy matchups. We've got 2 Collective Brutality, which have a lot of applications as well, especially good against Burn decks. We've got 2 Damnation against creature decks. We've got 1 Detention Sphere as a catch-all answer to various permanents. Then we've got 2 copies of Relic of Progenitus against opposing graveyard decks. We don't want to run cards like Rest in Peace, since those stop our Sword of the Meek combo, but with Relic of Progenitus we have a little more control over it. And then 1 copy of Engineered Explosives as another catch-all answer, also works very well with cards like Academy Ruins. So that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the draw, and this looks like a keep. Do need a 3rd land to cast our Thirst for Knowledge. So we've got a turn 1 Inquisition here most likely, as we pick up a 3rd land, which is nice, so let's lead with Inquisition and find out what our opponent is doing here. Alright, so this looks like some sort of Lantern control deck with Whir of Invention. I guess it could also be some sort of Tesserator deck with Panthead Prism, since Panthead Prism isn't commonly run in Lantern decks as far as I know. So yeah, this looks like some sort of artifact-based deck anyways. So Fatal Push we don't care about. Maelstrom Pulse could be slightly annoying. Panthead Prism makes sense here, since that shuts off triple blue for Whir of Invention, and also slows down the opponent a little bit. So yeah, let's take the Panthead Prism. Let them keep the Whir, which they're pretty far from casting. And we don't care about removal spells too much. So here we could just run out Sword of the Meek, which I don't mind. I think we can fetch an island and run out Sword, which is fine if it gets destroyed by Maelstrom Pulse. And then next turn we can Thirst for Knowledge and potentially discard some of these dead removal spells. And their opponent found a 2nd Panthead Prism, so they might be able to cast Whir of Invention next turn. And alright, we found our Thopter Foundry, so combo assembled. The problem is that our opponent still has that Maelstrom Pulse, so I don't think we want to run out the Thopter Foundry without finding something like an Inquisition or a Thoughtseize to take that Maelstrom Pulse first. So let's just play out a Swamp here and say go. Opponent with another Delta, and end of turn we'll Thirst. Alright, let's discard 2 cards, and that will be Push and Path. Untap, there's Emrakul, which is a little unfortunate, but I guess we're going for the Thopter combo instead here, so I think we'll start with an Inquisition. See if our opponent wants to respond with their Whir of Invention. So they still have Whir of Invention, which could get all sorts of things, although I'm not too sure what. Then still have Maelstrom Pulse, Fatal Push and Damnation. So I think we take the Maelstrom Pulse here, and then hope that Whir of Invention can't get anything too annoying. So yeah, let's take the Maelstrom Pulse, and then we can run out Thopter Foundry. So they're gonna cast Whir of Invention in response. X equals 1, I guess they can get a Pithing Needle and name Thopter Foundry instead. They're going for a Mox Opal. Alright, let's play this untapped and say go. Abrupt Decay on Thopter Foundry, so we can sacrifice a sword to get an equipped 1/1. I guess that's better than sacrificing the Thopter Foundry itself. Sack the sword. Get it back and attach it. Thopter Foundry down. And Fatal Push on the Thopter, that's fine. Alright, we get to untap, find Inquisition. Opponent only has Damnation left in their hand, so I think we just start by casting a Thirst. And we found another Thopter Foundry, excellent, so let's discard 2 cards here. Inquisition and Emrakul. Shuffle everything back. And we'll play out another Thopter Foundry here. And say go. Opponent drawing a lot of lands. And we're just going to make a whole bunch of tokens end of turn here. Opponent can Damnation, but that's fine, we can still keep going and making more tokens. Opponent keeps drawing lands. So end of turn. It's gonna take some clicks. Alright, after some clicking, we've got a total of 5 tokens. Picked up another Inquisition. I think we just attack for 6, put the opponent at 12. And then I think we'll play out our land and then say go. And then end of turn we can just make another 6 Thopters if we want to. After opponent Damnations. Alright, and our opponent concedes. On to sideboarding against a Whir of Invention deck. Still not quite sure what they're up to. We saw a lot of Maelstrom Pulses and Abrupt Decays. So Fatal Push and Path to Exile seem pretty weak. Engineered Explosives and Detention Sphere seem like good replacements. Dispel, I guess, can counter a Whir of Invention, which is better than nothing. And then I guess we can put in 2 pieces of the puzzle. Don't think we need Relic of Progenitus here, so let's try something like this. Alright, taking a look at our opener, it looks pretty good. We've got Lingering Souls, Thopter Foundry as parts of our combo, and then Thirst can help us dig, Thoughtseize for some disruption, and Academy Ruins can also help us assemble the Thopter Foundry combo if it gets disrupted. Opponent has their own Inquisition, so I'll be curious what they take here. They might just take our Thoughtseize to protect their own combo, and there we see Thoughtseize going to the graveyard. And I think we'll just play a tapped Godless Shrine here. Does give our opponent a little bit of info that this was our draw step, but it's not worth paying 2 life later in the game when we can just play it tapped right now. So next turn we can run out Thopter Foundry, and then we can Thirst or Lingering Souls. Opponent is just gonna take our Thopter Foundry, but we have Academy Ruins if we really want to get it back. I guess the same reasoning applies as last time, that we can just play a tapped Watery Grave and say go. Dimir Signet into Sword of the Meek, so our opponent also with the sword combo looks like. And now we get to either Thirst for Knowledge or Lingering Souls. I'm kind of liking Thirst for Knowledge more here, since we want to get rid of these lands. I don't think we need to play around a counter spell, so I'll just pass a turn here, pretend like we have interaction, and then Thirst end of turn. And their opponent assembled the combo, so we need to try and find a way to disrupt it. And Engineered Explosives will do nicely. So let's discard 2 cards. And I think we discard Emrakul and a land, even though it will shuffle the Thopter Foundry back into our deck. So let's discard Emrakul and Flooded Strand. Alright, so I think we just run out Explosives on 2. And that should be pretty powerful here. And I think we just blow it up right now. So our opponent can make some tokens, but we'll get rid of the Dimir Signet, the sword, and the Thopter Foundry. And then we can Academy Ruins back the explosives to get rid of all the Thopters, and then we can try and stabilize with Lingering Souls. So we do have enough mana where we could play out Academy Ruins, and then in our upkeep, use the Academy Ruins to put the Engineered Explosives back on top of our library, play out Engineered Explosives for 0 and sacrifice it all in the same turn. But the problem with that play is that our opponent still has that Ghost Corridor that they can use to blow up our Academy Ruins, so I don't think we want to go with that play here. So our opponent hits us for 4. Our opponent uses their Ghost Quarter on Godless Shrine, maybe hoping we don't have a basic Plains, but as it turns out that actually works in our favor, since now they can't destroy our Academy Ruins with Ghost Quarter, and we get to return Engineered Explosives however many times we want. Let's just play out Academy Ruins and say go, since we don't really want to run out Lingering Souls when they're gonna die to our own explosives. And our opponent drew another Thopter Foundry, which is pretty unfortunate, since now we need to get rid of the Thopter Foundry first, since the opponent can sacrifice Mox Opal to also return the Sword of the Meek. So this is gonna take 2 turns now of getting back Engineered Explosives and taking 4 from these Thopter tokens. But luckily our opponent used their Ghost Quarter on our Godless Shrine. So we can play that on 2 and then upkeep Academy Ruins, so let's make sure to put a stop on our own upkeep. Run out Explosives on 2. And I guess we might as well run out Flooded Strand, fetch, get a tapped Fountain, and then sacrifice the Explosives right now. Opponent can make some more Thopters. So we'll take 6 from these, but then we should be able to finally get rid of all of them, and then play our Lingering Souls to start beating down. Pantat Prism doesn't do anything here. So we get hit for 6. And in our own upkeep, we'll use Academy Ruins on Explosives. Then draw the Explosives, play it for 0. And then I guess there's no need to sacrifice it right away, so we can just pass a turn. Opponent attacks. And we'll sack the Explosives. Alright, we get to untap. And now find Sword of the Meek. Let's play out Sword of the Meek. Flashback Lingering Souls and say go. So we're just hoping our opponent doesn't find another Thopter Foundry here. I don't think we need to get back Engineered Explosives quite yet. I think a random draw is probably better still at this point, since we want to find some ways to apply more pressure. Run out Serum Visions. The spell could be okay. Yeah, I think we'll keep Serum Visions on top, as we have plenty of mana to work with. We'll equip one of our spirits and get in for 5. Opponent with a Mox Opal, that's fine. And if at any point we find our Polymorph, we're pretty happy. Still no need to get back Explosives, let's Serum Visions. Thirst for Knowledge and find pieces of the puzzle on top as well. I think we keep the pieces on top, since that'll help us find Polymorph. Then we can attack for 5. And then we can Thirst right now if we want to. And Emrakul definitely needs to get discarded here. And I guess we'll discard Thoughtseize as well. Shuffled those back. Does mean we lose the possibility of putting the Explosives back on top, but I think that's fine. And then we could run out pieces or keep up the spell. I think we just run out the pieces. And there we go. Find Polymorph and Lingering Souls. Lingering Souls also going to the graveyard, perfect, so next turn we can Polymorph for Emrakul, and our opponent will have a rough time dealing with that. So let's start by attacking. Then we can Inquisition our opponents, and then we can even Polymorph with Dispel Protection. Opponent has Abrupt Decay, so that could have broken up our Polymorph, as we couldn't even counter that with a Dispel, so that works. But now we get to Polymorph and make sure that we find our Emrakul, since had our opponent killed our Spirit Token in response here, they could have stopped our Polymorph from working. So go get Emrakul, and I guess we'll flash back a Lingering Souls as well, for good measure, and that means we get to return our sword. Opponent gets 1 draw step to get out of it, and they don't find the answer. Awesome, so Polymorph manages to beat Thopter Foundry in the semi-mirror. So on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, but unfortunately I don't think we can keep this one. 1 land, Emrakul in hand is not ideal. Well, the 6 isn't great either, but I think we can keep, and then hopefully Serum Visions can make things better. Fatal Push, I think we can bottom in the dark. Opponent with a Glimmer Void into Signal Pass, so this could be an affinity deck. So already regretting bottoming our Fatal Push, but that's okay. So I think we just fetch for an island and then cast Serum Visions, since we want to get these fetch lands out of the way first before we start bottoming more cards. And we kind of want to draw that Fatal Push now, so run out Serum Visions. And alright, there we drew the Fatal Push again, so that's nice. Bottom the shores, top the thirst, and say go. So next turn we can push, and then we can thirst, getting rid of some of our lands. So that should help us fix our draw. So had we kept the Fatal Push, our opponent would have also lost their Glimmer Void. So our opponent probably drew the Blinkmoth Nexus for the turn, and now we see Steel Overseer, which we want to push instead of the Signal Pest. So let's Fatal Push the Overseer right away, before our opponent gets to put any counters on their creatures. Say go. And see if the opponent has a follow-up here, like another Overseer, or perhaps an Arcbound Ravager, or Cranial Plating. Springleaf Drum instead. Opponent with another Glimmer Void, so I assume one of those was their draw step. And another Signal Pass, their opponent 1 card left in hand. And it's a 2-drop, and that's an Arcbound Ravager, which is a little scary here. Although their opponent doesn't have the Inkmoth Nexus, only the Blinkmoth. Alright, Lingering Souls is actually pretty nice here. So we'll go with that. We can fetch a Plains. We could also thirst, discarding Lingering Souls for value, but I think we just want to cast Lingering Souls twice. So the Souls do a good job of blocking the Signal Pests. So we only need to worry about Arcbound Ravager, as we see Mox Opal, which translates into an additional +1/+1 counter for the Arcbound Ravager. Of course, if we just top deck Polymorph, then we win on the spot. No attacks from the opponent, that's good. And we found a Sword of the Meek. I think we still want to Thirst for Knowledge here, or we can Sword of the Meek plus Lingering Souls Flashback, which is also pretty appealing. But I think we want to Thirst just to try and find a Polymorph here, or our other half of our sword combo. I think we just run out our Urborg here and say go. There is an argument for just casting our Thirst of Knowledge right away here if we find the Serum Visions we want to cast, but I think we have plenty of mana next turn already, that casting something like a Serum Visions or Fatal Push is pretty easy, and this way we represent more interaction for the opponent. Opponent did find a Cranial Plating, but we still have those Lingering Souls tokens to block with. Opponent's gonna equip the Ravager, so 7/1. Of course our opponent can just sacrifice a bunch of artifacts so that the Ravager doesn't trade for the Spirit tokens. I think we start by casting our Thirst for Knowledge here to get some more information. Alright, we found our Thopter Foundry, so I don't think we can lose. So let's just discard 2 lands. And we can pretty safely chump here. Force our opponent to use the Arcbound Ravager. I guess we could have just taken the damage, since we might not have enough blockers next turn to the point where our opponent can move the Cranial Plating at instant speed. But that's more or less the same amount of damage, so that's okay. So now we can just run out Thopter Foundry, run out Sword of the Meek, and now we can make Thopters at instant speed. Our opponent's gonna have a hard time, especially game 1, to deal with this combo. Another Cranial Plating is nice, but that's not gonna make the difference here. So another Plating on Ravager. Opponent gets in. I guess we'll block with the Spirit here. And end of turn we'll make a Thopter. Untap, find another Sword of the Meek. but there's no point in running that out here. So we can attack for 2 and say go. And then we can make 6 Thopters on defense here. So we've got plenty of Thopters to block with, even if our opponent were to move the cranial plating at instant speed for a double black. And it should take 1 or 2 turns here to close out the game. So end of turn, we'll make some more tokens, so we'll skip through this to save you some time. Alright, we get to untap, find a Serum Visions, we're just going to attack with everyone. Our opponent can block with a Blinkmoth Nexus and then bump it up with the other Blinkmoth to prevent the damage. But that's about it, and then we can make more Thopters on the way back. And alright, our opponent sees the writing on the wall. Onto sideboarding against Affinity, so they might be bringing in their Ether Grid, which can shoot down our tokens, but that's okay. I don't think they'll have a ton of graveyard hate, they might have some Thoughtseizes after sideboard. So what do we want to bring in? Damnation seems pretty excellent, Detention Sphere seems okay, and Engineered Explosives is gonna be good. I don't think we need the Brutality, even though it is an additional removal spell for the opponent's creatures. Elesh Norn is also pretty appealing, although I don't think our opponent can beat an Emrakul, so that's probably good enough. Thoughtseize can probably come out, can probably shave on some number of Inquisitions, since our opponent is going to empty their hand rather quickly. And I think that's it. Alright, taking a look at this hand, we've got our Thopter Sword combo and Polymorph and Lingering Souls, plus a path, so just need to draw 2 lands and this hand is perfect. Opponent could mess with it if they have something like a Thoughtseize or Spell Pierce, but even then, I think this is an easy keep. Opponent off to a quick start with Mox Opal into Spire of Industry, but no creature to follow up, it looks like. Opponent just passes. Engineered Explosives, we could play that on 0 if we want to, would already deal with the Mox Opal, but we can always play that later if we're gonna play it on 0 anyway, so let's just play Flooded Strand, say go, and then keep up path. We are running quite a few lands, we've got 25, so we should be pretty likely to draw some lands, hopefully. Opponent with a Cranial Plating, that's fine. But no creatures we have to deal with yet, which is good. So end of turn we'll go fetch, I think, a black-white land, and put that in play tapped. Untap, find another Lingering Souls, so get an island. Run out our Thopter Foundry, and say go. So our opponent can get an Infect hit in this turn if they want to. I guess there's an argument for running out the sword first, in case we want to Engineered Explosives on 2, since blowing up the sword is fine, but blowing up Thopter Foundry could be a problem. Instead we see Etched Champion, which has protection from all colors, which does include the Thopters, which are blue artifacts. But if we do manage to get enough mana, we can Engineered Explosives on 3 at some point to get rid of the champion. Plus we can gain life with our combo as well, so it's not like we can't race. Alright, so we picked up a land, which is nice, so we can get a swamp here. And then run out sword. And start assembling Thopters. And we could even at some point consider pathing our own Thopter just to get a land for Polymorph, since we still have that combo as well. So let's see how much damage our opponent can do here. Rest in peace. Alright, that's gonna put a stop on our first combo, but I think we'll just make 1 Thopter first here, sacking the Sword of the Meek. So a very effective sideboard card against 1/2 of our combo, but I don't think our opponent's gonna see the Polymorph coming here. So we get to make 1 Thopter before Rest in Peace hits the battlefield. And we also have Engineered Explosives, which can get rid of the Rest in Peace, of course also gets rid of our pieces, but it's not like we're cold to Rest in Peace. We also have Detention Sphere as an additional answer. So we just need to make sure that we can find land number 4, if not we might path our own Thopter, and then hopefully Emrakul can seal the deal. Arcbound Ravager from the opponent. Opponent gets in for 6, cannot block. So down to 12. Opponent is tapped out, so if we can find a land, we can polymorph, and there we go. I guess we might as well get in for 2. And then hopefully our opponent can't kill us next turn. So polymorph into Emrakul. This is where our opponent might be a little surprised. And Emrakul is colorless, so we can block the Edge Champion. And it also has flying, so we can block Yawgmoth Nexus. So our opponent will need a pretty specific card to get out of this. Our opponent can still move the Cranial Plating at instant speed, which is definitely relevant here. And our opponent with basic Swamp in their affinity deck, not something you see very often, it's typically Island or Mountain for Galvanic Blast or Thoughtcast. Instead, basic Swamp, not sure what that means. 3 mana for another Edge Champion. So our opponent can no longer move the plating at instant speed here. Yawgmoth Nexus gets activated. So I don't think we need to worry about the Yawgmoth Nexus here, since our opponent's gonna have a hard time getting to 10 Infect, so we'll definitely block the Edge Champion should it attack. So we're definitely blocking here. Opponent can sacrifice to Arcbound Ravager, and then Annihilator 6 on the way back is gonna be pretty devastating. And there we go. Alright, sweet, managed to beat Affinity with the nut draw in game 2. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw here with a hand with 6 lands and polymorph. I don't think we can keep that one. And this is not that much better, honestly. 5 lands Inquisition, but I think we'll keep this one. And hope to find some of our draw spells to filter these lands away. Flooded Strand on the bottom. Opponent with Inspiring Vantage, so it could be a burn deck as we see Riftbolt suspended. So we do need to find some action quickly here as we find Polymorph. Alright, so that's part 1. Let's Inquisition our opponent. Double Lava Spike, Mountain, Sacred Foundry, so not the best draw from the opponent. So we might have some time here, as we're only scheduled to take 6 damage total. So Riftbolt goes upstairs. Opponents might save Lava Spike for prowess triggers, or they might fire it off in fear of another Inquisition. They're just gonna fire it off. So we know they have at least 1 land in hand, and there's Lingering Souls, perfect. So let's run out Flooded Strand, say go. So we can go fetch a white source, so we can Lingering Souls into Polymorph. And we're probably gonna kill our opponent before they kill us. The only thing that can disrupt our plan is a removal spell on one of our tokens. So end of turn we'll fetch a Godless Shrine and find Watery Grave. So we still know our opponent has a Sacred Foundry in hand. So let's run out Lingering Souls. And then hopefully next turn they won't have a removal spell for our Polymorph. So let's pass. Opponent with a Lightning Helix on our face end of turn, so we know their last card is a Sacred Foundry, so if we can get them to tap out, that would be beautiful. Opponent gets a Foundry with their fetch land, and do they have a play? They don't. Alright, found another Lingering Souls, so this is actually pretty tricky. I think we can definitely start by attacking for 2. Opponent takes it. But I don't think our situation is going to get any better. They're going to keep all the instants in hand that they can. So this is probably our best window to resolve our Polymorph. So I think we just go for it. And hope our opponents... Alright, this works. Lightning Helix on our face, and now we know the coast is clear. So very happy our opponent did that. They were worried about counter spells, but they did not expect Emrakul coming out of nowhere. And knowing that their last card is a Sacred Foundry, they're not going to be able to burn us out here, since we get to blow up all their lands next turn. And then they're going to be at least 2 or 3 points short of killing us. Skullcrack puts us to 3, but we know their last card is Sacred Foundry. So they will lose all their lands. So I guess we can Serum Visions first here. Find a Thirst and a Plains. I think we bottom both. And then move to combat. Attack with everyone. We do want to keep cards like Goblin Guide in mind, so we do want blockers in the form of Lingering Souls tokens, since we know our opponent still has a land in hand. I guess they could technically draw a Lightning Bolt or a Lava Spike and kill us with their remaining lands that they have in hand. So we're not 100% to win the game here, but it's still very likely. I guess we'll run out the Lingering Souls just to have a blocker for Goblin Guide, but Goblin Guide wouldn't kill us. And then play this tapped and say go, and then hope our opponent doesn't draw exactly a Lightning Bolt or Lava Spike. I think those are the only outs. Since it's gotta be a 1 mana burn spell, our opponent doesn't draw it, and we win the game. Awesome, against Burn, not an easy matchup. So Collective Brutality is awesome. So Iona could actually be better than Emrakul in this matchup, since Emrakul still gives the opponent 1 turn to play their burn spells, while Iona we can just name red, and if they did not bring in Path to Exile, we should be able to win. Then the spell should also make the deck, and then what do we take out? Can probably shave on some copies of Thirst for Knowledge. Now the downside is if we draw Iona, then we might be in trouble, since we can't discard Iona like we can Emrakul. So maybe we need to bring in both, then get rid of our Thoughtseizes. And I guess we can shave another Thirst for Knowledge and try it like this. And this hand looks quite good. We've got Polymorph. Thopter Foundry can make a token by sacrificing itself. So definitely a keep. Just hope that we're fast enough. So now that we have both Emrakul and Iona in our deck, it's kind of a coin flip whichever one we get. But I think we prefer to get Iona, so we can name red our opponent with turn 1 Goblin Guide. Not what we wanted to see, since we don't have any Fatal Push. Did reveal a Glacial Fortress at least, so that's nice. Alright, so we want to see some cheap removal in the following couple of draws. Instead another Thopter Foundry. So I think we want to Inquisition here, and then next turn we can fetch an island, run out Thopter Foundry. Could also fetch an island and Serum Visions here, but I think we want to Inquisition in case our opponent has a second creature, because that could add up to a lot of damage. So let's play Swamp, Inquisition, and see a hand with Boros Charm, Lightning Helix, Lava Spike, Swift Spear, Skullcracks. I think we take the Swift Spear here and hope our opponent doesn't draw a second land. Could also take the Helix, since that's a way for them to disrupt the Polymorph combo. But then our opponent does get to run out Swift Spear if they draw land, also Lava Spike in the same turn, which adds up to a lot of damage. I think we go with the Helix actually, and then try to survive long enough to get to Polymorph. Opponent did find land number 2, so they can run out Swift Spear plus Lava Spike here, which is gonna add up to a total of 7 damage, so we're already down to 11. So we might just be dead next turn, as a Boros Charm is another 8 points. I guess we're technically not dead yet. So we do need to fetch an island here, so we can run out the Foundry. Could also Serum Visions in the hopes of drawing into a Fatal Push, but I think we need to Thopter Foundry here. So let's get an island and run out Thopter Foundry. This does show that we have the second part of the combo in our deck, which could come back to bite us in game 3 if we lose this one, but it's probably still worth a try. So our opponent can Boros Charm here, and they'll hit us for a total of 8, down to 2. But then we can make a Thopter and gain a life, which is relevant. Opponent decides to Boros Charm here. So they have 2 cards left, one of them is Skullcrack. And what does Goblin Guide reveal? Academy Runes, alright. So we're at 2. And we drew Polluted Delta, so I think we need to Serum Visions here to try and find some way to survive. Alright, so we drew a Serum Visions and then found a Fatal Push and a Sword of the Meek, so we almost got there. So even if we keep the push on top, Serum Visions into the push, kill the guide, we're still dead to the opponent's burn spell. And if we just sacrifice the Thopter Foundry to itself to make a token, we go back up to 3, jump, but then we're also still dead to the burn spell, so we're dead here. So on to game 3, opponent with quite the excellent draw. I don't think we change anything, just need to be a little faster and try and disrupt the opponent in the first couple turns. So we would like to play first, and this hand looks quite good. We've got Serum Visions to dig and then Fatal Push to interact. So let's keep. Opponent down to 6, that's good. So let's run out Shores. And then the question is if we even want to Visions on turn 1. I think we do. And then take the hit from a creature. Lingering Souls and Fatal Push. I think we need to keep the Lingering Souls on top, since otherwise we don't have tokens to go with our Polymorph. And I think then the plan is to search for Polymorph. And then Fatal Push, we already have one. I don't think we want a second one, since our opponent might not even have a second creature. So let's stop Lingering Souls and bottom Fatal Push. And say go. And then hopefully our opponent does have a creature turn 1 that we get to Fatal Push. And then we have Serum Visions to dig as well. Instead our opponent just has a Lava Spike, so we're glad that we did not keep the other Fatal Push. Given that our opponent did not have a creature turn 1, I think it's safe to Visions and then play a tapped Godless Shrine. And there's a Polymorph, so Swamp on the bottom, Polymorph on top. Also found our Thopter Foundry. Say go. So we do have a turn 4 Polymorph with Lingering Souls, but of course our opponent can interact if they have a removal spell for one of our tokens. Turn 2 Boros Charm to the face, playing around potential counter spells out of our sideboard. I think we just run out the Lingering Souls here. Could also go with the Thopter Foundry, but then we have to sacrifice it to itself to make a token if we want to turn for Polymorph. So now our opponent might be keeping up their mana. If they don't, then they could be in trouble. Instead we see Shrine of Burning Rage. Alright, that's a way for them to kill us through Iona, so we do have to keep that in mind. And a Lightning Bolt right away. So our opponent should be tapped out here, so we do get to polymorph into either Iona or Emrakul. And we also find the Sword of the Meek for Thopter Foundry plus Sword. So I think we get in for 2 first. So let's run out Academy Ruins. Yeah, I think we go with the polymorph, since if we do manage to find Emrakul, then we can get rid of the shrine. If we find Iona, then we will have enough time to deal with the shrine. So let's polymorph. And what did we find? We found Iona. So we'll choose red. Hope our opponent didn't bring in Path to Exile. I don't think they will have. So the shrine ticks up, but then we have the Sword plus Thopter combo, and Iona was probably going to kill them before the shrine would kill us, and our opponent concedes. Awesome, so managed to beat both Burn and Affinity, 2 of the premier aggro decks in Modern, with our Dirtily combo deck. That's always a good sign. So I want to thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day. I also want to thank all my patrons for supporting the channel, and you can do so yourself as well over at patreon.com/legendvd, where you get cool rewards for supporting the channel, as well as getting us closer to our goals, where with every goal reached we will release an additional weekly series. So if you want to see more content, Patreon is the place to go.